In pure Sophie fashion, I can never read just one book at one time. I have to be stressful and constantly be reading like multiple books at the same time. So the first book that I'm in the middle of is one that I'm incredibly nervous but very excited for. It literally came out last week. I'm picking it up, and that is Sunrise on the Reaping by the amazing, incredible, fantastic, marvelous, jaw-dropping, astounding Suzanne Collins. For context, I read the Hunger Games original trilogy whenever I was in like middle school or junior high. And I have loved the story ever since then. I read it multiple times when I was younger. I watched all the movies, but then I preferred the trilogy books to the movies, right? And then I kind of haven't read them since. Now, the first prequel about Coriolanus Snow came out when I was in high school, and I did not read the book, but I did watch the movie. I loved the movie and I loved the story. In fact, I liked the movie for the prequel more than the movies for the original three. Because I did not read the book, I can't comment on the book, but I do remember hearing a lot of discourse about it. Some people loved it, some people hated it. So I didn't know where to stand and whether or not I wanted to read the original prequel. However, this time I am not letting anything stop me. I'm reading the prequel. This is like the prequel in between the first prequel and also the original trilogy. So it goes this book, and then these three books. And I'm reading this one in the middle that just recently came out last week. So hopefully that makes sense. This middle book is about Haymitch and his Hunger Games, which was during the 50th Hunger Games, the second quarter quell. And if you have not read the Hunger Games before or you know nothing about it, I feel like I'm kind of dropping you in the middle of a bunch of lore that I don't really want to explain. So maybe just do a quick Google and come back, okay? But I really liked Haymitch's character in the books and in the movies, and I'm really excited for his book, but also so nervous because we know he wins the games. That's not a spoiler because he's alive in the later books, so he has to win the game. But besides that, I know nothing about this book, and I know I'm probably going to cry and also question all of my life choices and the state of our government just because of what Suzanne Collins writes in her books. So it's a lot, but I'm so excited for it. The other book that I'm in the middle of is Nightshade, which is a small, I think she's an indie author, just released this book in January, and I've heard not much discourse about it, but I follow the author on Instagram, so I wanted to pick it up and read it. This is a contemporary romance set in an old college, I think it's like in Scotland or something, like in the mountains. Very dark academia. It's boy falls first, boy falls harder. And I've also heard that there's a lot of really good tension and yearning in this, but I haven't gotten far enough in this book or the Hunger Games book, to be honest, to really have any concrete opinions yet. Now, last night I was reading Nightshade on the way downtown. I'm still on spring break, so I'm here visiting my family, and we went to go see Hamilton, the Broadway play, live downtown, and it was so phenomenal. Arguably, it was better than the original on Disney+. Don't shoot me, okay? I like Lin as a writer, but I don't like him as an actor, and so seeing a new cast of characters play this story that I've loved for years was just so incredible. But I mentioned that to say that I was reading this book in the car yesterday, and then I picked up Sunrise this morning because I want to be difficult and read two books at once. So I'm excited about this vlog. I hope you are too. As always, subscribe and let's get into it. I have one of my favorite things ever. Book mail! I'm so excited. Obviously, I'm back in my dorm room. Yesterday, I drove up from Houston to Dallas, and now I'm back at college, and I had a very exciting package waiting for me. So let's do a little unboxing, shall we? They really taped this one well. How does one open this? Oh, it's one of the, okay. Give me a minute. There she is! Oh my goodness. Drum roll please for A Court of Wings and Ruin. Look how pretty. I love these covers so much, but also this one is chunky. It has to be the thickest of the entire series. This one is looking at around 700 pages. I don't even know if you can see it. I don't think you can, but I have the first two books in the series up there. And if you haven't been watching my recent vlogs, I've basically been collecting this series. I've already read it before, like years ago, but I've never gotten the paperbacks before, so I am buying them slowly secondhand. This one was about $7 plus shipping, so much cheaper than like getting it at Barnes & Noble for like $20. And it's cute. I'm loving the cover. The only issue is that there is this like price tag that was very clearly ripped off and not well. But honestly, I feel like I can ignore that. I can look past that because overall secondhand books are never gonna be perfect, but like this is in great condition. All the pages are fine. She's great. So I'm excited about this one. I'm gonna go put her on my shelf. As far as book updates, however. I got to, I think, 45%. So I'm going to call it about halfway in Sunrise on the Reaping last night. This book is really going by so fast, and I have quite a few thoughts on it so far. Number one, I haven't read a Hunger Games book since like at least 4 or 5 years ago, genuinely, because I didn't read the prequel, like the first one, like I mentioned to you in my last update. So I'm reading this and I'm like reacquainting myself with the writing style that Suzanne Collins has, and I'm forgetting, or I did forget, that this is actually a YA book. Like, it technically is written for adults too because of the content that it talks about, and it's not necessarily made for younger kids, again, because of the content, but the writing style is incredibly easy to absorb because it's very simple, it's point blank, and she's telling you very deep truths about dystopians and oppressive governments and all these different things that are applicable to our modern day life, while using language that is very, not even elementary, but it's just very simple and straightforward, which is why I think it's such a great book to read, because anyone can understand the message she's trying to convey here with this book. Now, as far as following Haymitch's story, I am really liking him as a character. I've always thought he's very complex, at least the grown-up Haymitch that we see in the later books. But when we first meet him in this book, he is 16, I believe, so he is quite young, obviously. I would not put him as a naive character by any means. I feel like he is very aware and accustomed to the brutality of the dystopia that he lives in. However, he has not been beaten down to the point that grown-up Haymitch was in the later books and in the later movies. And so we're kind of watching him just like be a good person, you know, in many ways. And my heart breaks a little bit because I'm like, the Capitol is going to break you, basically. I'm just like waiting for it, honestly. I'm trying to say this without as many spoilers as possible. Part of it is that it is a prequel, so most people have already read the trilogy, The Hunger Games, so they already know like where he ends up. Some people have not, so I don't know like what is considered like spoiler territory, but I will just say broadly that later Haymitch, like in the later books, has a lot of issues with alcoholism. He is addicted to that. He is very grumpy, very closed off, and it's a very different caricature than what we're reading now in his prequel. So I'm like waiting in anticipation, but also I'm so sad about the waiting that I'm just like, what are they going to do to you to make you the person that we see in later books, if that makes sense. I will say also there are a lot of people in this book that we recognize from the later stories. I mean, obviously the first prequel with President Snow in it, because Snow is so much older than the characters in the original trilogy, a lot of the characters that were in his Hunger Games, which is the 10th Hunger Games versus the 74th and 75th in the Hunger Games trilogy, are so much, it's like 64, 65 years earlier. It's a whole other generation of people. So while some last names may be familiar because it's like ancestors, they are not the exact same people that we read in the original Hunger Games trilogy. However, with Sunrise on the Reaping, this book, we are meeting people who are Haymitch's age, and Haymitch is like middle-aged in the trilogy. So there are a lot of people in the trilogy that we recognize, and I'm not going to say names because I don't want to spoil who shows up, but there are a lot of names that I know that we are now viewing them 25 years younger in this book, like the exact same people from the trilogy. So that's really interesting to me, is to see how they weave into Haymitch's story as well as later on Katniss and Peeta's story. It's very interesting to almost work backwards in this prequel process, but I would recommend, if you are new to the series and you haven't read anything by Suzanne Collins before, my AC just turned on, but anyway, similar with Star Wars, how you watch movies 4 through 6 before you go back and watch the prequels 1 through 3, I think if you're reading Hunger Games for the very first time, I would still start with the original trilogy and then go back and read Snow's book and then read Haymitch's book, because I think that reading them in publication order, you get the most out of what Suzanne Collins is trying to emulate versus reading them in like chronological order, when I feel like you won't be as connected to Snow as you would be with Katniss, if that makes sense. So if I had to choose, read them in publication order. Those are my updates, and I'm excited to add my newest book to my book collection on my shelf. At this point, I think I have almost 80 books on my shelf, like legitimately. And I'm thinking about getting rid of a couple, but most of them are here to stay. I think the answer is get a new bookshelf. We need to start expanding. Okay, let me pull myself together a little bit. I just finished Sunrise on the Reaping. Took a couple minutes to compose myself, but this book is so... I don't even know. I don't even know what to say about this book. And I especially don't know what to say that's not in spoiler territory, because I could yap about this forever, but like, what's not a spoiler, you know? Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. There's just so much going on in my head right now. There's so much. Okay. To just clear things up very swiftly, this is a 5-star read, 100%. I think it's my 3rd or 4th 5-star of the year. I'll say this. I'm going to leave the spoilers for just a minute, but in case you haven't read the book yet, and I really, really encourage you to, and the rest of the series, again, didn't read the prequel, but the story that I received through the movie tells me that at least the plot is fantastic in the prequel, and I assume the writing is always to her usual standard, which is incredible. So I would recommend the prequel as well, even though I haven't read it, and I do think I want to read it eventually, but that's beside the point. This book, I went into it expecting greatness, obviously, because it's Suzanne Collins, and because it's Haymitch, and we all love Haymitch as one of the main characters that we hear about in the first trilogy, in the movies, things like that, but I didn't expect this to top the original trilogy for me, and I don't think it topped it, but I think they're really neck and neck. And I say this because this book has so much more depth to it than just Haymitch's story. This book ties in Snow's story from the previous prequel and the characters in the original trilogy, and that, I think, the tie-in and the connection is what made this book so much more emotional for me than just his story. His story is incredible. He is so brave, so courageous, so persistent, determined to make a statement with his potential death in the Hunger Games. Obviously, he doesn't die, and it's not a spoiler because he's alive in the future trilogy, but he's so determined to make a statement. He's so determined to prove to the Capitol why they're so deranged and messed up in the head. But besides all that, besides his great character, besides his story, which is so heartbreaking, so sad, everything that happened in this book, it's like I was numb for most of it. And I expected some things to happen. I didn't expect others. I felt it, but I wasn't crying. But then the minute closer to the end, when we're getting more tie-ins to specifically characters like Snow and Lucy Gray from the previous prequel, and then Katniss, Peeta, some other characters I'm trying not to spoil in the future trilogy. When those characters tied in more and I can see the through line through all 3 books, despite them being written out of order, Suzanne always had like one main goal that she's working towards. She had this thought out way far in advance. It's not only incredibly impressive as an author, but it's also like so much more emotional, and it packs so much punch because everything that our characters were working towards in both prequels and in all of the books really were only fully realized with Katniss Everdeen at the end of the 3rd book, Mockingjay. It took decades and generations of people all fighting for one thing to eventually get that freedom at the end of the trilogy. It's just like mind-boggling to think about, and I don't know what else to say that's like not in spoiler territory, but this was like jaw-droppingly incredible. If you have not read anything from this series, please read it in publication order, but please read it. And if you haven't read Sunrise on the Reaping yet, it did just come out, so you have a little grace period, but like please pick it up. It will literally like, it will wreck you. It will, but it's also like life-changing material. And like I'm still processing, and I think I will continue to still process. I think the movie comes out next fall, so like fall 2026, I want to say, and I'm incredibly excited to see who they cast and what happens with it. I rewatched Catching Fire a couple nights ago just because I was in the Hunger Games mood. I do think that the original trilogy movies are not the best ever, but I do think that the movie for the prequel is incredible, so I assume that since the production quality only increased in like the 8 years in between those two, I would probably say that the upcoming movie will still be at the same standard that Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was. But yeah, so 5 stars for this book. I'm unwell, and I want to move into some spoiler territory. So if you haven't read the book yet and you want to, and I encourage you to, skip this timestamp here on the screen so you can miss spoilers, and we'll get into the next book. But if you want to hear spoilers, if you've read it already, let's chat, okay? So, did I expect everyone to die? Yeah, I did. I knew that Haymitch won his games, and so I assumed that everyone going into the games, including Maisie, Wyatt, Luella, Lulu, they all were going to die. Unfortunately, we have to think about that. Now, who I didn't expect to see was Plutarch and his character. Effie showing up was a little bit of a surprise, but I suppose with Plutarch comes Effie. There were other characters, that popped up while at the Capitol that were like, oh, hey, I know you, kind of thing. And it makes sense why Haymitch knows these people now whenever in the future he helps Katniss and Peeta as their mentor. But specific connections that made me like my heart stop was the fact that Haymitch's like the love of his life, whose name is Lenore Dove, it's never explicitly stated, okay, but I firmly believe that she is the daughter of Snow and Lucy Gray from the first book, as in the prequel. And I realized that pretty early on, but like that news just continued to like punch me in the chest over and over throughout the entire story, because the reason that Snow becomes bad is because of Lucy Gray leaving him, as we all realized in the prequel. And so that changed him into this awful dictator, and everything that happened in his life is because of Lucy Gray. Watching him continue to torture and manipulate and ruin the lives of everyone, but also Haymitch, specifically because he knows that Haymitch's love is his daughter. Like crazy stuff. And all the tiebacks to Covey, like the songs, oh my god, when The Old There Before was like written in the book and I started playing it in my head as I was reading, that's when I first broke into tears, because that's the song that Lucy Gray sings in the first prequel, and it's like a sign of revolution, it's a sign of rebellion, it's like what makes her, it's like one of her big songs. She sings this when the snakes are like covering her right before she wins her games. It's like it means everything to Lucy Gray. And when that song started playing at the funeral of his mom, of his brother, of the other tributes from 12 that died, like I was absolutely in tears at that point. I was like, the connections are giving me chills. And then furthermore, another through line connection is that Haymitch is one of his best friends. I forgot what his name is. Let me find it. It starts with a B. I don't remember how to pronounce it. Burdock is his best friend's name from 12, or one of them. Burdock marries Astrid, and their child is Katniss. So like we're seeing Katniss's parents interact with Haymitch because he's at the generation above Katniss. And then Luella, who is his neighbor, he used to call her sweetheart because she was a couple years younger than him and used to like toddle on after him when they were younger. And they always had this really sweet friendship, and the way that he treated her right before her death was everything. And the fact that he calls her sweetheart, so when he sees Katniss for the first time, this is revealed in the epilogue, when he sees Katniss for the first time as a little kid with the pigtails, and Katniss reminds him of his friend Luella. And so that's why he starts calling Katniss sweetheart, which is a through line through the entire trilogy. Like all of these things that either Suzanne thought of in advance or she's writing backwards, but either way, it's incredible to read about the plot of them saying that I need someone luckier to come along and not let the sun rise on the reaping. Get it? Sun is on the reaping. Like that was the last promise that Haymitch made to Lenore Dove, was she wanted him to promise her that he wouldn't let the sun rise on another reaping, which basically means that there wouldn't be any more games. And it couldn't happen with him alone, but reading that now after knowing the story that he was there helping Katniss, helping Peeta along the way, and he was there when Katniss eventually ended the games as the Mockingjay years in advance, like 25 years later. And it took him 25 years to fulfill that promise to Lenore Dove, but he eventually did. And now it says that he's ready to meet her in death whenever his time comes. Like that's just so emotional. I'm gonna cry again. I'm gonna cry. Oh my god. Everything ties in. The plot is impeccable. The political message that Suzanne is trying to convey is so obvious. It's so clear. The personal connections through all of this stuff, the tragedy of the deaths and the manipulation and the inevitability of Snow is in charge and you're going to die because of him, basically. His mother, his brother Sid did not have to die. Lenore Dove didn't have to die. When he went back to 12, they were all technically alive, but his family's house blew up in flames. Lenore ate some gumdrops that Snow had poisoned because Haymitch was trying to rebel in the games, because he made a statement and was trying to be defiant and prove to the Capitol that they are so up. Because of all this that he's doing, his family is dying because of it, and he has to live years alone without them, falling into the traps of alcohol and grief. The end of this book is so sad. It is so sad, but because I know how his story ends with Katniss, I have just a little crumb of hope in my heart, because I know that eventually he is successful in his mission to not let the sun rise on the reaping. And with that, I gotta pull it together. I really do. So let's just take a deep breath together. That's the end of my spoiler thoughts. I'm gonna shut up now because this clip is already like almost 20 minutes long and I need to pull it together. Don't call, don't text. I'm unwell.